Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Miss Happy Catholic, and today I'm with my mom, Kathleen to talk about a really great book that she found several months ago, and she's been sharing it with me, and I've shared it as a resource on our tridrecovery.com website. It's really excellent, and I want to get you excited about the book so that you run out and read it because I think it'll be great. So we'll talk to Kathleen about that and just whatever else comes up, because it's conversation and you just never know where it's going to go.
That's right.
So anyway, so Mom, tell us about how you found this book.
I actually didn't find it. My sister just gave it to me in January. And I was like, oh. And she is a source that I trust. She is a solid Catholic woman, a woman of prayer, and she's searching for resources all the time. So when she handed this to me in early January, I was like, oh, interesting. I will show it to you. It's called The Mindful Catholic: Finding God One Moment at a Time by Dr. Gregory Bottaro. And I was very intrigued. So I looked forward to it, and I wasn't sure what to think. I hadn't really thought about mindfulness as a practice. I knew that the term itself could be problematic.
We should talk about that, because some people's alarm bells are probably going off. Mindfulness? That's crazy.
And I have even heard really super solid Catholics, more in the public square than we are, very cautious about the word, or even alarmed at it and saying anything that's called mindfulness you just want to stay away from. New Age, whatever. Has it been used in New Age circles? Okay, yeah. Does it have a Buddhist heritage? Yes. Is it also a solidly Catholic practice? Yes, yes, yes. And this book is very succinct. There's a whole appendix devoted just to that question. And I'm not an expert in Buddhist, mentality, but Dr. Bottaro, with respect and tact, and again, very succinctly makes distinctions between, key elements between Christian Catholic mindfulness and the Buddhist approach. He starts by talking about the Trinity as a unity and a diversity. 1 and 3, 3 and 1, and how as Christians, that's just, our greatest mystery. And so we accept and pursue unity and diversity. There's no conflict. Buddhists pursue unity, but they do not accept diversity. Another key difference is that the Christian approach expects the mind to be active and full, mindfulness, and he gets into that in great detail through the whole book. The Buddhist approach is more about emptying the mind, which is a cause for concern, because as we know by scripture, if you empty yourself, something's going to come in and take its place. Mm-hmm. And you're not always necessarily in control of what that is. So those are, a couple of distinctions that I think can calm our spirit about it. Also, just, I guess, recognize that the word, like I said, can be problematic for some people. But if you define it carefully and you understand what that definition is, and you receive his instruction on how thoroughly Catholic it is, that shouldn't be a problem anymore. But then I guess recognize that some people are just going to shy away from it. One program I was watching where the woman, she used the word, but again, she kind of backed away from it. And then she began to just talk about the practice itself that is described in the book,
using different terminology,
but it's the same thing. And I thought, okay, so she's just highlighting the fear factor, I guess, of that word. Okay. So other people are going to react differently to the word itself. But I also want to make a point of, why did I go ahead and trust this? Why did I do more than just read the book? Mm-hmm. Because I had also gotten to know another very creditable person who was assuring me as well that mindfulness has a strong Catholic background and context. It's not in conflict with our spirituality at all. And so I had already been hearing about that for a few months. So I wasn't terrified of the word. What else led me to trust it is the foreword is written by Peter Kreeft. I haven't heard a single bad thing about that guy. I mean, he's an amazing philosophical brain. And he writes a wonderful brief foreword, which I wish I had time to just read it because it's not very long. But in it, he makes the point that this book is the how-to manual for discovering deeper peace, for collecting the energy of your mind and being able to focus it to go deeper in prayer. It's a way to practice the presence of God, literally practice the presence of God. And that is one thing that the exercises always do. There's this simple, beautiful prayer at the beginning and end of every exercise. So you are always bookending the exercise by being aware of being in the presence of God. And so the prayer, simple, ever present God, here with me now, help me to be here with you. So obviously focused on being present with God, who is always present with us. So that's some pretty solid theological foundation.
Oh, yeah.
So Peter Kreeft, and then saints throughout the book. Every chapter begins with a nice quote from a saint. We have Augustine, Teresa of Avila, Padre Pio, Therese of Lisieux, Elizabeth of the Trinity, Faustina, John of the Cross, St. Mary Alacoque, she's mentioned in a chapter. Sources like Abandonment to Divine Providence, the Practice of the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence. The Pietà is mentioned, and scripture is sprinkled throughout. So I think that Dr. Bottaro does successfully show how thoroughly Catholic this practice can be with the right understanding. And it's interesting to me that he does not shy away from the use of the word mindfulness. He sort of tackles it and reclaims it, if you will. And I admire that. So the other thing I appreciate about Dr. Greg is that he was mentored by Father Benedict Rochelle, who he says lived almost exclusively in the present moment, in his later years. And so he mentored him not only as a spiritual father, because Dr. Greg was a Franciscan friar for, I think, 4 years before he discerned his ultimate vocation to marriage. He was also a psychologist. And so it's interesting, too, that then Greg became a psychologist. He left the friars, went to school, became a psychologist, got married,
cool. I didn't know that.
Had a pack of kids, started the online, I want to give you this too, CatholicPsych.com. That's their main website. And you'll find online resources. Of course, the book. He also, when you purchase the book or the course online, you get immediate access to audio files of the exercises. Among all, they have a podcast, they have a blog, they have other courses, check it out. It's a great site. Yeah. So that's part of how I came to trust it. And right. And that's what I would recommend. The people are going to have to listen within themselves to know how truth speaks and how it's safe to tread. But I think most of us will agree that at some point you have to take a risk and step out in faith and trust that, God is with you, like the prayer says, and he doesn't want you to get lost or confused or mixed up in something, goofy. And if you step out and it's not exactly where he wants you to go, he knows how to kind of bump you back onto the track. So I took the risk. It's not the first, thing I've done that seemed experimental. And, it was a little bit like, okay, this is about the way I think, and how I see myself. But I thought it was worth the risk. And these months later, I definitely say, I've just discovered things in this path that no other way has shown me.
Wow. Okay. So I thought it was cool as you were telling me about the book, and I was thinking, oh, this sounds really great. It was really helping your healing journey in a lot of ways. And so I'd like to, that's partly why I recommended it to people, was because I realized this is something that can help heal you on a very basic level and your ability to be intimate with God. Because before that point, if you're not whole, you're going to struggle in your relationship with God and advancing in the spiritual life. And this seemed like a really fundamental part. I thought, well, man, who wouldn't benefit from this? But especially people who have been religiously traumatized or, just had like kind of a fear, shame upbringing in the faith or something where that was really emphasized, or, spirit good, body bad, or, like kind of stuffing yourself because in the name of holiness, like this isn't good, or you shouldn't listen to yourself, or, certain things that come naturally to you that you weren't sure what to do with. And so it's like, is that really bad? What do you need to do with those things? How do you understand them? Like, why were we created the way we were? What is God's vision for that? And this book seemed to really answer a lot of that. So
it really did. I of course I have my unique specific journey, and I have been very dedicated to it in the last year. And one of the things I discovered is that I've lived largely in my mind. And there are reasons why that is. It's just safer there, But what I also learned is because it was so safe there, I wasn't really aware of my emotions. I wasn't tuning into them. I didn't think that really mattered. I thought the will was everything. And my ability to exercise my will trumped everything. And I interpreted the spiritual reading I did in light of that, because that was my perspective. And so I was just like, oh, I don't really, I don't suffer from this, that, or the other thing. I'm check. Good. Move on to the next. And also sensations in the body. I just thought, that's the base nature. I'm moving on, because I'm in my head. We're in good, in good a place. And so I took off and did all kinds of great things in the spiritual life, different disciplines of prayer, all kinds of different prayer and novenas and so on for years and years. I mean, very steadily committed, and for, large sections of time in my day. And was that graceful? Yeah. Was it a place to encounter God? Absolutely. Did I receive graces? Mm-hmm. But then last summer, I was listening to some webinars on healing, and I kept hearing, it didn't matter who was being interviewed or whatever. They would always say, if you're watching this and you're not sure if you need healing or where you are on that, ask yourself this question. Do you just feel stuck? And I thought, interesting question. And I thought, yeah, like I have been applying myself and doing all the right things, all the best things, giving it the prime time of the day, my best energy, not doing other things in order to be available to, my spiritual life, my relationship with God. So that was really good that I exercised that discipline, but I had to admit that I felt stuck. And that was the only word. I was just like, wow, stuck. And then there's just all this encouragement. It's like, keep on listening, and then here's another, every month there would be another program to watch, another person. And just by watching some of those webinars, I started to go, wow, there's a lot more going on here than I would have known. And even the fact of discovering that I was stuck is a gift. It's not a curse. It doesn't mean I'm doing something wrong. Although that at first I think I just need to try harder. And it's like, no, it's not really the problem. Like I've been knocking it out of the park for a long time. Yeah. And so why would God let me get stuck? Why didn't it just send me to the heights? Yeah. I was doing everything I was supposed to do. Right. And I believe in my case that it was because I had ignored parts of my created being that he gave me as a gift. And I didn't know that. As I said, I thought I was, advanced or something down the road. Yeah. Beyond those things. You didn't need them anymore. You'd risen above, but that's I think we're hitting on like a misinterpretation of like St. John of the Cross, especially. He's one of those that you can easily read in. I'm not sure. Well, it's a bummer because we read his work so far post-mortem. It's like, he's not there to say, that's not how I meant that. Like, I can see why you think that, but that's not it. He can't interpret for us his own works. And there's always an interpretative spin. Right. So it's like you read it and you're like, oh, that means I've got to, cut off all of this stuff. I shouldn't enjoy anything. I shouldn't care about anything created, material, whatever, physical, because the dark night of the soul is coming and it's going to wipe it all into oblivion anyway. Right. And so the sooner I get rid of that, the better, and feel like I don't need it and despise it, scorn it, spurn it. We're all worms and dust and,
No Man and all that, like Thomas à Kempis and The Imitation of Christ and all those things, like those great books, like they have so much value.
Yes.
But I realized that I read so much of that, even, from like the beginning of my reading years, I would just pick up these books and be like, man, I can read, therefore I can read this.
Yeah.
And then however I absorbed it, I just believed that that's what the book said. And then that's how I took it, and that's how I lived it. And it was like, oh, now I'm getting older and I'm realizing, and I don't think I quite got it right. And that I've been mispracticing some of these concepts.
Right. Like your understanding took you, a distance, and then it sort of, I don't know, sputters out. And this isn't serving me anymore. And you just don't know until the next teacher comes along to show you more. Right. And on that vein, I want to share, there's a tiny little anecdote in here about St. Francis of Assisi. Speaking of the friars, that really caught my attention, because I've heard the stories about him experiencing a temptation and throwing himself into a thorn bush and really being harsh with his body. In one paragraph in this book, Greg tells a little bit about the reason why he was so harsh with himself that way is because his father punished him by locking him in the basement and being hard on him, beating him. Oh, God. So naturally, Francis is going to grow up having that influence the way he viewed his body. And then he became very spiritual. He had his radical conversion, and he brings that into his spiritual practice, right? These super harsh penances, Well, the surprise for me was at the end of his life, he was actually apologetic toward his brother body because he was so harsh. As he matured and became more holy, he understood it was not the enemy he had thought it was. And so he began to adjust his view of his own body. And I thought, I never heard that before. Nope. I never heard that before. So again, another inspiration, another point of, I think I'm going to take a little further look. The next paragraph contrasts that example with St. Therese, who grew up with a super gentle, loving, and kind father. She didn't have any of that distortion about her body and what needed to happen. In fact, she sort of instinctively knew that punishing the body wasn't really a path to a deeper union with God. She did penitential things like fasting and observing the rule and whatever, but she just knew that harsh penances were not going to increase her sanctity. But look at the father model.
Yeah.
And so she didn't have to go through that transforming understanding about the beauty and the worth of her body. So why does that speak to me? As I mentioned, I wasn't really in touch with my emotions or what I'll call sensations, the senses, the body, what happens in the body. And so the mindfulness exercises take you right there. And I knew from a few months before in other books that I read that I was sort of like, whoa, because I never cultivated that. But Dr. Bottaro makes the excellent point that God became man. He totally sanctified the body. He became incarnate. And if we don't embrace the giftedness of our physicality, we are actually denying the gift of God and the way he created us. He created us with a body that has senses. He created us with emotions. That wasn't our idea. He created those. He gave us an intellect and a function of reason.
Yeah.
But he meant them to be a unity, not at war with one another. Yeah. And that's what I began to understand, that my experiences way back in my life led to like a conflict. And so parts of me just strong-armed the other parts and said, nope, this is how it's going to be. Yeah. And then I grew up with that, believing that that was a strong position, but it actually was a crippled position. So it took me some time to just become open to, okay, then what am I going to discover? Yeah. But again, I trusted and I risked. And I picked up the book, and you can approach it different ways. It's basically introduction and 8 chapters. The 8 chapters reflect an 8-part course in mindfulness that presents certain concepts, this one, then this one, then this one. So the book sort of mimics that outline. you could just pick it up and read it. That's a perfectly fine thing to do. Read it and then go, I'm going to go back and I'm going to read and do it. I'm kind of hardcore. So I thought, well, I'm just going to dive in. So I read it and also began doing the exercises as he suggested. And as much as I could. He does make the excellent point that the progress, the benefit you'll experience is dose dependent. So the more you can do, the deeper you'll go, the more you'll experience of it. He's also very gentle. And it's like, if life happens and you miss 4 days, be gentle. Just start where you are. And if you get to the end of, let's say you read a chapter in a week, you do the exercises, and the next week rolls around and you're like, I just don't feel like I'm there. Just take a few more days, just make it work for where you are. I actually adopted it as my pre and during Lenten practice. It just worked out that way. And I thought, this will be a good time. And it was for me. It was a great time. So I started a few weeks before Lent and then finished it during Lent. And that way I could observe more of the discipline of, it's been a week. I'm going to read the next chapter, do the exercises, carve out time for that. So
that's cool.
And I guess it's probably one of your questions. It definitely takes you to your body. I mean, that's where you go. That is interestingly, what I discovered is that is the way you live in the present moment. If I live in my head, I can be any moment that I want to be, which is not the present moment. And that's what I knew about myself already. I can live in the past, I can live in the future, and I can make pit stops in the present, but I'm always kind of moving on and feeling like that's a good way to be. Right. And I thought I've been attracted to the present moment for a long, long time. And this takes you there. The how-to manual. I can't overemphasize that. If you want to enter the present moment, this is how you do it.
That's cool.
Through your body. And not because it's bad, but because it's there. And it exists in the present moment, but you can be oblivious to that. Mm-hmm. So you learn to just focus your attention and become aware of just different sensations, where you might be feeling tension, where you might be touching a chair, or maybe you're lying on the floor, or whatever your position, just feeling the different areas of your body and tuning into that. And one of the things that blew my mind the very first time I did it was how much information my body was sending me, and I was utterly ignoring it. To just stop and listen, I was overwhelmed. I thought, there's all this input. My body's telling me so much, and I am not paying attention at all.
Whoa.
Yeah, it really blew my mind. I was just like, and then the emotions, sometimes I wouldn't have any, and sometimes they would be there and I didn't know what to call them. So it was a beginning of learning that discovery. Being open to how I was created. Also realizing that to be in awe of a creature of God, which I am, is actually giving him worship. And so by denying those things, I did not know I was denying them, but I was not even giving him full worship. I wasn't acknowledging my full creation. And that to me has been really, really pivotal.
Wow.
Yeah. And I mean, that's just, that's just.
Yeah. It's like us deciding, that this part of my being is superior to this other part of my being. Like, where does God ever say that? No. I mean, it's like, I've just been learning a little bit about dualism over the last year.
Yeah.
And that's a heresy. It's like, it separates the body and the spirit. Like, they're not really conjoined of one whole. And it's like, without that integrity, you're going to get into all kinds of weird things. But so much spiritual literature and things really operates on the principle of dualism. And so, or it's maybe just affected by it, even if it's not, outright promoting it, because most of these people, they don't want to promote anything wrong. Right. But it's like, it's still really infected our thinking. And I was like, wow, I've been a heretic and I didn't even know it. I mean,
he has a short section in the book on that very thing. And he goes, the heresy we all believe.
Oh,
and then he just talks about it and you go, he's so right. I didn't even know that I was affected by an idea that someone promoted 400 years ago. And it's just trickled down through the ages and it's gained momentum. It's just in the air we breathe. So we don't even know that we're affected. You pick up a book like this and you go, wow, I'm affected by a lot of things that I just didn't know. That's the other thing about him being a psychologist with a living active practice. He's got a lot of experience talking with many people, and then his own journey, and just coming, reading research and studies and teaching people. He's got experience. He can talk about this stuff. So dualism it has an effect on us, and there you can move back from that, but again, this is a practice that helps you to practice that.
That's so cool.
It is.
Well, I mean, I've read The Practice the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence 2 or 3 times, I think. It was like, it's a great book. And I really wanted to do it, but I felt like I would try and I couldn't figure out, like, something was missing. I don't know why this is so hard. Like, he was able to just enter into it, and it makes so much sense. And it's such a perfect way to pray. And it's like, pray always. Well, that's exactly what you're doing. And, how can there be anything better? But what if not all of us are capable of that? What's the missing key? This seems like it probably is.
Yep.
Because if you're not living the present moment, how can you be present to God in every moment?
Right.
Because you're living right now, not before or after. And that living in your head, and it's like all this stuff going on in your body. I mean, it's just making me think of, all these stress induced illnesses and things that we have. It's like, is that even good stewardship of our body, that we just are like, you don't matter, I don't need to tune in. Like, maybe when it gets extreme, we're like, wow, I've had a headache for like 6 hours, I think I'm going to go take something. And then we're just suppressing it. We're not being like, wait, why do I have this headache? How do I need to eliminate this, problem that created the headache so that it goes away, or so I don't have it again? Are we really doing that? Or are we just trying to kind of, like a rock skimming across the surface of the pond, it's really bad.
Yeah.
I mean, is that really the fullness of life that God intended for us? I mean, is that in heaven when we get our bodies back, we're gonna be like, oh, hey there, piece of junk.
Yeah. Stranger.
I mean, a stranger. Yeah. Well, why did I need you? I was okay in heaven.
Right.
I mean, I wasn't really
I had
missing
my soul,
my body.
I had my mind.
Yeah. I mean, I'm like, I was already with God. You don't matter. It's like God understands because he made us that we're not complete without our body.
So the other, there's so many significant elements. I just want to make this, and maybe we'll come back to it. The foundation for Catholic mindfulness is trust in God. You start with trust. You operate from trust, and you deepen your trust. So it's trust, which also we know is mercy, which leads into the point of taking the time. This is apparently the biggest roadblock that people have. They start to read the book and they're like, oh my gosh, I just don't have time to do this. And he says, if you feel that way, you can't afford not to read the book, because in the beginning, it feels like you're doing one more thing and you're already like maxed. But you're only doing one more thing as you learn how to do this thing and integrate it into your life, because you'll learn. I'm not an expert. I'm like the least qualified person to talk about this, but I'm practicing. I'm trying. You learn how to bring mindfulness, the awareness. Let's say this, the non-judgmental awareness of the present moment. That's the definition, into everything you do. And it just unlocks so much in our lives. And he does an excellent job of just describing why we're not living at our full potential, the things we're struggling with, and why. He talks about how the brain works, why we stress out, and what's happening in our bodies and our emotions and our minds. And I'm reading it going, oh, just sign my name after that. It's like I could just stamp my name all over the book. and so he really knows. So taking the time that's so hard to scrape together also becomes challenging, because you realize you're going to have to practice loving yourself. You're supposed to be non-judgmental and accepting in the moment toward yourself. And at first I was like, whoa, I didn't know that would be a challenge. But at that point, I was becoming very aware that you can only love your neighbor as you love yourself. So Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself. It's almost like as yourself is kind of tacked on at the end. Yeah. But we really need to say, to flip it around, you could love yourself and then love your neighbor, because they're equal.
So you have, like you're saying, it's presupposing that you love yourself,
And that
therefore
you know
you will understand how to love your neighbor. But all the time, I treat other people in a way that I don't treat myself, or I give them consideration or credit for things, whatever, that then I turn around and I just start like interiorly beating on myself.
Yes.
You don't get any excuses. You don't know, but you should take care of yourself. You should do this. That wasn't fair. This is what you need so that you can be okay, or that, you can feel okay about this next time. I don't do that for myself, hardly ever. I have to like stop and remind myself.
Right.
And if you were talking to somebody else, what would you say to them?
Exactly.
And then I'm immediately uncomfortable thinking about that in terms of myself.
Yes. Yes. So somewhere down deep, we feel unlovable, or that we don't deserve that kind of attention. And yet we know we're supposed to see ourselves as God does. And so actually doing exercises where you practice looking at yourself the way God does, with non-judgmentalism, acceptance, a non-critical attitude, compassion, mercy. Did I say gentleness? Could I say it 4 or 5 more times? Like, we know that's how God looks at us, but we don't share that vision. So we need to align ourselves with the way God views us. This gives you the way to do that. It's uncomfortable if you haven't loved yourself that way. But I knew instinctively with the first exercise that if I did this thing and I practiced loving myself, it would automatically change the way I saw other people. And that was true. Whatever way I love myself automatically increased my compassion, acceptance, no critical of other people. Like, I just looked out on other people and I was like, wow. And I had been trying before, and overcoming myself and confessing my sins and stuff. Yeah. And this took me there. Like, do this thing. Here's the idea. Now do this thing. And you go, and it happens. That's the power of it. It teaches you how to love yourself. It begins to introduce you to God's vision of you, and the repeated mercy, gentleness, acceptance. I mean, that's the whole exercise is about that. In the first 4 chapters of the book, he talks about how your brain works and why things happen the way they do. Here are some exercises that just get you to practice the technique. You're really mostly tuning into your body and your emotions and your thoughts. You're noticing everything. Your mind is full of all that's going on right now without judging, which again becomes a challenge because we don't realize how instantaneously we judge so many things. It just happens, and we're running on those judgments. And so this gives you a space to sort of slow that down and practice. The other thing I love that he says, helped me a lot, was if you feel like the more you practice, the more you fail, he goes, it's designed to be that way. You're not doing it wrongly. You're actually discovering yourself. You're becoming aware, which is the whole point. It's giving you a new awareness in the moment without the criticism. It's safe there. That's the other thing you experience, is you're safe there. Even if you're experiencing anxiety, you're safe in the moment. In fact, it's kind of curious that last night I was awakened by all kinds of anxious thoughts that were, I don't know why, and they were different. It wasn't focused on one topic. They were from all over. And I just came awake and I just felt, boiling inside me. And I thought, wow, this isn't calming down. So I just got up and I got my phone and I did a few of the exercises. In chapter 5 through 8, he'll take you from just the practice to now, what are we going to do with this practice? How will we encounter troubling thoughts or feelings? The first 4 is let's just practice becoming aware. And then he gradually leads you to, okay, so I did 2 of the, let's open our awareness to the body and to sounds. And then we're going to explore difficulty. And that's where you get in touch with everything in the moment. And then you just gaze upon those thoughts or emotions or sensations, whatever you're experiencing. So I'm glad that I had that last night so I could have, so I just gazed at them. And then he just asks questions. What do you notice about them? What are they? What are their tone? How does it feel? But you're in a space now where you're observing, you're noticing, you're acknowledging. You're not pushing anything away. You're not solving any problems. You're not moving away from uncomfortable things.
Yeah.
You're safe in the moment, even if your feelings are going berserk. Like you go to that space where you can feel that and not freak out and say to yourself, it's okay to feel like this. I'm not in any danger, and then let's practice what he's saying. Let's look at what's happening. And it's amazing how you get in touch with your true self, your self underneath it all. Another blow the mind thing that for me in the book was your thoughts and your feelings are not you. And I was like, what? I always thought they were me. They happen within me. They are real and they matter. And that's why we need to notice them, observe, acknowledge, accept. That's just important. But you do begin to experience through practice that deeper sense of yourself where you have the faculty to choose whether you're going to focus on your body or the thoughts or whatever. You find a space in that instead of letting it run away with you and you just get into your problem solving mode or your autopilot or your doing mind. He talks a lot about what that is. You're in a place where you don't have to engage it. You just have to observe it. And that's a place of peace. Again, even if you're feeling things, it's a place of peace because you know God is there with you.
Yeah.
And you can just rest there and let the exercise lead you through that moment. And you will get to exercises later in the book where you can then make choices about how you're going to respond to things. It's very gentle. It's very gradual.
Yeah.
It's just very loving.
Yeah.
And powerful.
Right. Also constructive.
Yes.
Because it also helps you not to be just ruled by these anxieties and these feelings, whatever they are, if they're positive or negative. It's like you don't have to just be swept away or totally overwhelmed and neutralized. Like you can kind of like, well, what's the word I'm looking for? Where you sort of like take the sting out of it or deactivate. There's another word, but I can't remember what it is. Well, anyway, but like sort of diffuse whatever is like, really like sharp or, disturbing or moving about it. It's like, it's a good thing. It brings it to your attention. Just like pain in the body makes you stop and be like, whoa, what's going on? Like, what do I need to do about this? And so those feelings are like, they're markers of something that needs attention. And so then you sit and you consider and you're like, what does my response need to be to this? What is this for? What does this mean? Is this something, where is this coming from? Like all kinds of things you could learn by doing that. But how often when I feel like that, I just try to kind of like get through it or sort of, I just need to distract myself so I can get back to sleep or whatever, It's like, I can't think about this right now. Or, I'm going to think about it right now. I'm going to get up for 2 hours. And I'm going to write a letter to so-and-so that I was thinking about. I mean, not like there aren't times when you do those things, but,
well, of course.
But honestly, it's like, but if you went through all that and you don't understand why and what's going on, well, you're just going to keep having episodes. It's going to compound into illness or, obsession or, or just something that is affecting you that you don't understand. And so how can you even do what God intends for you to do with it? It's like God sends you enough suffering and things that you need in your life. It's built in if you just accept it and you're disposed to, cooperate with God's will. But it's like, this is a tool that helps you actually do that better, right?
And that's interesting about suffering because I've certainly experienced the temptation in the practice of this to want calm and peace and resolve. But that's a temptation because this isn't to eliminate suffering. Like you just said, suffering comes unbidden. We don't need to create more, and often we do. So it's not about eliminating suffering, but it is about allowing it to present itself. And we don't have to ignore it or flee from it or whatever. We can observe it and we'll be in that space with God where we can notice how we're being affected and then pray about that. And say, is there something I need to do about it above just accepting it? But we don't have to, we're not going to eliminate it. And we all know that somehow. Our lives are full of different things that challenge us and cause us even to stumble sometimes. But But God is at work in all of that. So he's not going to eliminate it. These exercises aren't going to eliminate it. That's not the point. The point is to grow accepting and open and aware. The big point he makes in there is when we get locked into that problem solving autopilot doing mode, it actually is kind of a primitive danger response. And when you're really in danger, the point is just to get to safety the quickest way. That's the point. But our body and our brains can enter this loop where they're just sort of sending that message around and around and around, danger, 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 danger. And the mindfulness dissolves the glue of that. It kind of just breaks that down so that you can find that place, that space, and it opens up creativity. It allows room for the intuition to work. And he talks in the book about how our intuition has been largely ignored to our detriment. We've overemphasized the critical, analytical, scientific, factual, and we need that. It's part of the function that we have, but our intuition has just been languishing. And so mindfulness takes us to a place where our intuition can function. That sort of knowing without effort. You just know something. It just comes to you. Or, you go to bed and you sleep on it. You've puzzled it and you're like, I just need a rest. Or you go to a baseball game or something. You do something to take your mind off of it. And guess what? Your mind's still kind of working on it. But you're not in that tense, whatever, I'm going to try harder to solve the problem. That sends messages through your whole system that get you stuck in that loop. And the mindfulness is the answer to sort of step aside and go, okay, what's going on? Am I safe? What's happening? Just noticing, not deciding anything, doing anything, being. The focus is being rather than doing. Do we need to do? But again, it's overdone. And what do we find? We lean too far one way or the other. And this practice is going to just bring balance on so many levels.
Well, it's so not fear-driven. I love that. It's like it just drains the fear right out of you because that doesn't have to be part of your response or part of what you consent to. It doesn't drive you. It doesn't make you white knuckle because it's like, I know about myself. I tend to be controlling. It's like, why is that? Because I'm afraid, because I obviously don't feel secure. So trying to get my handle on something, I'm going to try as hard as I can. Like even that, it's kind of like, why do I not measure? I think it deserves this much effort. I think this is what is required of me in this situation. It's like, no, I'm just going to squeeze myself like an orange. I'm going to see how much I can get out. And then hopefully it's enough if I at least give it everything I had. And it's like, wait, did I really analyze that first? Or did I let my soul, simmer on that for a while? Did I really take it to God and see what God was asking me to do in that case? Does it deserve that? Or is that a wrong response, He
tells you why that happens. You read why that happens and you go, wow, that happens to me a lot. And he's like, this is why. This is what your brain is doing. This is what your body is doing. And they're working together and they just keep sending that message back around. And you get stuck there. And it's urgent and it's fearful and it becomes frantic and produces all kinds of, irritability and anxiety and, heart palpitations, whatever. It goes on and on, as you've already kind of made that clear. And he makes all that in the book. And so, it's a way to get off the crazy train. And he says, if he did a brain scan and then you did the exercises for a period of time and he took another brain scan, your brain is the physical matter and your mind is the invisible. Your brain would be changed. So it's not like I just have to exercise to stay in shape. It literally reconfigures your brain. It reroutes your neural pathways so that you're really retraining not only your mind, your brain, but your heart, your soul, your body. Your body is experiencing this acknowledgement. Your body is like, finally, I'm being noticed. Wow, I've been shouting for years, to someone who's been deaf. Me. And now the body's like, well, this is good. You're listening. I've been here the whole time and I had truth to share with you. I had information for you. And it was all important. It all mattered. And so I just love how beautifully integrated it is, how holy, whole, balanced,
right,
helpful, healing. It's healing you.
yeah.
And so, but again, the more you practice, and whatever level that is right now, if you make a beginning, just make a beginning, just do what you can. And just begin right there, practicing that compassion, gentleness, acceptance, awareness, and be open to the failure, and know that the failure is actually a sign that you're doing the thing. It's good evidence. It's supposed to show whatever it's showing, so that you can just start to notice it and go, aha, well, look at that.
Right.
I never noticed. You kind of have a deep encounter with yourself. And again, God is right there with you.
Yeah.
So even if you're sort of scared, or you're like, it's like he's right there. And if you're dealing with something difficult and it's just overwhelming, then it's good to take a break. And he talks about that. Again, always loving yourself like you would a good friend, someone dear to you, as you described. You would just want to take care of them in the most nurturing way possible. And we need to practice that with ourselves. And this is, I know for a long time I held a wrong notion of self-love. That term actually sort of equaled sin.
Yeah.
And so I've had to let new definitions come into my awareness. And I have had to be open to using vocabulary that made me feel a little, with a new understanding. And that's been very good.
That's cool.
To exercise a new vocabulary, new definitions, and applying that. But to take the risk of loving myself radically, like how much does God love the soul? He delights in our existence before we even exist. He delights in our existence before we can do anything. And he delights in our existence whether we do anything ever again. We cannot change the fact that God delights in us.
Wow.
That's the starting point. Do I trust that? Am I willing? Am I bold enough to love myself like that? Can I go to a place where I will delight in myself? God right there saying, this is how I see you. It's pretty great, isn't it? And you stand there going, it's pretty great.
But you shouldn't feel like that, God, because I'm not that good.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, now we're telling God.
Yeah.
Now we're telling him what's what. Like,
oh my goodness, he has a little section. It's all, everything's brief. Everything's so bite-sized. He has a little beautiful section on shame and how we can take the message that we don't just do bad things. We are bad. And he goes, that's a lie. You are not bad. You are not bad. We do bad things, completely different. And shame tells us we are bad. And that's why we struggle to go, I'm going to delight in myself. Isn't that a sin? In fact, another place he goes, something inside us would have us believe it's a sin to let ourselves be happy. And I thought, like happiness is wrong or dangerous or a sin. Like being unhappy somehow means I'm safe. I've had to confront.
I mean, it sounds
like,
so bad, but it's like, yeah.
Like I never would have thought that until I'm reading it, and I'm like, that's true. I have believed that, and I didn't even know. And then it's making so much sense. Like, ooh. And so then you take the scary walk toward, I'm going to try to be happy. I'm going to try to experience pleasure. God.
But what about what God told Saint Bernadette about? I promise to make you happy, not in this life, but in the next. And we're all like, that means that I shouldn't be happy in this life. Right. Because it's supposed to be for the next life. Right. So if happiness comes, it's kind of like, don't get too comfortable because it's going away at a moment's notice. It's not something to be sought. It's not something God guarantees us. He might not even want to give it to us in this life. It's like, whoa. What are we reading into that? And that was something he told one person at one specific time in their lives. And I'm sure it was in a context, okay? Right. Holy moly.
But then we take it and we plaster the whole world with that. The whole church, our whole spirituality, we think, well, he told this to Saint Bernadette. And I know I've done it too, just like you. I've read things through whatever filter I had at the time and then applied it the best I could. And now this is really flipping a lot of things on its head. But go back to Saint Francis. Who ever heard that at the end of his life, when he was at his holiest, he took another view of his body? Yeah. I want to do that before the end of my life.
Yeah.
I might be at the end of my life. I don't even know, but I want to get on with that.
Yeah.
It's like, I want wholeness,
Right.
holiness. The other thing I want to say about how this, the wording of the book struck me was he makes some pretty bold claims. Like, this practice will help you do everything you want to do better. It's going to help you be your best self. If you're a housewife or a CEO or a baseball league owner or whatever, any of those things, it's going to help you do that the best you can. And I'm like, that's a pretty big claim, you know, or this deep peace that God wills for you, that you were created for. This is going to take me there? Really? I mean, he says a lot of bold things, and I'm like, I mean, so I take the challenge. I'm like, really? So that's some pretty big stuff, pretty big promises.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like one little practice, one little, you know, so what do I have to lose?
Yeah.
But like, we've been talking about some pretty foundational stuff. And I also want to mention, before, you know, we run out of time, trust in God. We do grow in trust of ourselves, but with God at our side, he's always there. The second appendix in the book is based on the Surrender Novena, which you may have seen. This is the large print edition. This is the regular edition. This was given to me by a friend 6 years ago on the 100th anniversary of Our Lady of Fatima. I'd never heard of it before. It's a novena that I prayed it 3 times a month for 5.5 years before this book came into my possession. And another reason I trusted it, lo and behold, Appendix 2 is an adaptation of that novena, Trust Again. So I love that novena. It really helped to deepen my trust. Coupled with the mindfulness practice, that it's actually encouraged. He says it's a good idea, if you can, to do a mindfulness exercise and then do the day of the novena. And the adaptations that are made to it just take you deeper into the message that Jesus shared with the soul who put out the novena. It's very cool. And so I was like, wow, Father Groeschel, Peter Kraft, the Surrender Novena, all of these saints, some of my top favorites. I'm like, what do I have to fear? I think I'm just going to dive into that stuff. Right. And try the experiment. And so, yeah, I've been faithfully doing it more or less since the beginning of February. So I'm a good 7 months in. I haven't taken the online course. I have thought about it just as another way to be, disciplined about it and regular.
Right.
It's going to be part of my life from now on. That's absolutely. Cool. And I do recommend it. When I started talking to Laura about it, should I put this, on my website? And I'm like, well, this is what it means to me. And she put it up on there. And then the website, CatholicPsych.com. I would recommend it. If you feel a little unsure, just pray about it. And just, it's all gentleness. It's all an invitation. It's all Catholic. It's a good way to go if you feel like now is the time for you to explore that. If you go on the website, ask questions, but do know you're going to encounter different people responding to that word in different ways. But Dr. Gregory Bottaro, he does a really excellent job defining, explaining, sharing so much wisdom and wealth and spirituality sprinkled throughout the whole thing. So
that's really cool. I'm wondering about how, if you just want to give us a few little things, like how the book has made you, do you feel has made you a better Catholic? Like your relationship with God specifically. Obviously seeing how God has made you, how he wants you to live, and how much he loves you is just shown him in such a warm way. Obviously it probably makes you want to draw closer to him. This whole, the point of this whole thing is like you knowing yourself so you can better know God, so you can love him so much more, right?
Yeah, it's, that I will admit that is, it's fuzzier in a way than I experienced it before, which is interesting. And I don't want that to be alarming. I think in my journey to integrate my entire being, like I'm honoring him just by doing that. And if I want to know what he has to say to me, I can pick up the readings of the day, any day, and I can see that he's talking to me specifically. And so there are ways to to be reassured that, yes, he's there and everything. But I think that it's taken me to a simpler state of being, a more childlike way. One of the words I struggled with early on was curiosity. And I was like, oh, curiosity, what's that? Yeah. Like, I think I buried that a long time ago. Who needs that? I've got this highly developed intellect. So to rediscover curiosity, I'm still really working on that. Getting more aware of that childlike feature of my being. You will not enter the kingdom of God unless you become like children. Yeah. It's a directive from Jesus. And that's why I think he has led me by the hand. I will say Therese describes an episode with Jesus where she's in a subterranean passage. So she's underground somewhere. She has no idea where she is. It's really dark. And the only light that's illuminating the unknown landscape is coming from Jesus's eyes, but his lids are down. So you can imagine his lids are lowered and there's this soft, dim light, but she really doesn't know where they're going. She has a sense that they're sort of climbing a rise. Yeah. But she's holding his hand. He's by her side and she has confidence in that. So she doesn't trouble herself too much with where are we going? What does it look like when we get there? Are we making progress? Am I doing everything rightly? She's just trusting, confident in him. She just has that phenomenal ability to rest on his heart and not worry herself about it too much. Yeah. So I feel like that's what God has been doing with me, is he's taking me back to that simplicity. And he's giving me this amazing opportunity to just dwell there. I don't have a lot of things demanding my time. I have some obligations, but they're not overwhelming. Number 4 kiddo graduated from homeschool in May. He was my last one. So I retired from homeschooling after 31 years. That's a big, transition. Yeah. But I'm all immersed in this journey. So it's like, okay, this is interesting. I don't have to work outside the home. I have a husband who just recently thanked me for embarking on the healing journey and for being willing to grow. And he has repeatedly said, you are changing so much. And he is happy with the change. So I don't have a lot of pressure. Now, obviously, people are going to have different walks of life. So everyone's journey is completely unique, but God gives the grace. So what has it done? I have this beautiful opportunity to become childlike. And, okay, last week I went to a rodeo with my husband and my son, and I was just having a blast. And we weren't even really talking. I'm just watching people get bucked off their animals or whatever. And I just turned to my husband and I said, why is this so much fun? Like, I'm just having so much fun. And he goes, it is fun. I don't know. It's just exciting. But for me, this is a big deal to feel fun, to feel it and go, I'm having fun. The next night, I went to a baseball game with my sister. We've gone to several and it's been enjoyable. But on that night, I was like, they play music throughout the game. Yeah. And I was just like jigging. And I was like, man, I'm just having fun, like fun. And I thought, okay, like a kid, but I'm, not a kid, but I am like you are, you're supposed to be. So it's integrating my whole self. So where am I with God? I would say, like Therese, I'm in an underground passage. It's pretty dim. He's there. But it looks very different than it did before. I'm trusting like as much as I can, like Therese, the mighty Therese, and all the other great saints, and our Blessed Mother and Saint Joseph, my patron saints, the Holy Spirit, they're all there. It's just looks so different, but I'm willing to walk that way and believe that, again, God has led me here, and he knows my heart, and he honors what's in my heart. And he wants me to be with him and delighting in him, delighting in me, delighting in everyone. And I am delighting in people in a way that I never did before. Yeah. That's a real big shift that I have perceived.
Yeah.
And I didn't notice that before, that real shift.
Wow. That's so cool. It's like,
It is.
Again, the fruits of the Holy Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. These things, they're so nurturing. It's like, wow, really? Like, that's what God wants to give me. And that's evidence of his work. Like, he inspired those words in the scripture.
Right.
It wasn't just this arbitrary thing. He could have had them say anything, but that's what he had them say.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're supposed to look for. And like, those are good signs, because we need more of these things in our life. Otherwise, it's like, it sounds like you're not trying to control your walk with God so much. You're not trying to check so many boxes, or like you're trying to be faithful, but you're letting him lead you like you haven't before. And you're just sort of having that curiosity and the wonder and the fun and the delight and the warmth and the trust. It's like, trust is like the little kid in the backseat of the car. They're not all worried about, are we going to go off the road? Oh, we're late to this thing that we're going to. Oh my gosh, like, is everything? They're just looking out the window and they're just like, I'm being taken care of. I'm good. Like, they're not necessarily aware of time passing the same. So even saying fuzzier, it's like, fuzzier is to what? Like, every little microscopic detail that drives us bananas as adults, because we have to be like aware of all that and taking care of everything. But the kids just get to kind of ride. And God doesn't really need us to like craft our journey to heaven and produce everything.
Produce or achieve.
Achieve. We just have to be disposed. We have to show that through whatever ways we can, but he does it. That's so cool.
I think it's remarkable for me, especially because I've been a hyper-productive, hyper-achieving person. And to have my childlikeness being restored at this point in my life, I could not have predicted it. No way.
So, as a last question, is there any advice you would give to the reader encountering the mindfulness book? Things that you think would help them get more out of it?
I would say what we've been saying, be open, be aware, be gentle, be patient, trust God is there, ever present, always, and just try to be with him the best you can, and accept what that looks like. Accept how you encounter the material of the book. Like, begin loving yourself in that way, and just notice it, and then just take the next step and the next step. Let that begin that journey to delighting in yourself, loving yourself, asking God to reveal his vision of you to your eyes. And but just start, and when you feel ready and that it's time, and ask questions, if you're not sure or whatever. If you need reassurance, that's okay. It's okay. But love yourself in that way. Let God love you there. I'm not there, but I'm on my way, and it has been the way to get there, to get closer to it. And it does make a lot of sense out of what I've known intellectually. All of my previous devotional practices and experiences, prayer, whatever, it's all coming along into this. But it's sort of, in a way, maybe taking a back seat. But when I encounter ideas and experiences in this journey of exploring mindfulness, it really resonates with the truth that I know belongs to my faith. I haven't bumped into anything that's been alarming or shocking or upsetting, would make me go, this is only for a select few. I don't believe that. I believe this is for anyone who has the courage to want to love themselves the way God loves them. And that you will love your neighbor better when you love yourself.
Wow. That's so cool.
So,
thanks, Mom.
You're welcome.
And also, Mom was telling me that there is an audio. So the audio exercises are online. So if you can just go online, do you have to pay, or is that free access to those audio exercises?
I don't know, because I didn't go on the site until I had the book. But I think that those are free. They won't make the same sense to you if you just start listening to the exercises without the context of the book.
Right.
So I think that you definitely want to do it together. That's what the intention is. So, but I have preferred, I started by reading the exercises. They're all printed in the book. So you can just read it and direct yourself through that, and it works just fine. But when I started using the audio versions, I loved it because I could just let go of thinking about what's the next thing I have to think about. He speaks it to you, and I could just sort of close my eyes and go where I needed to go and let him tell me what to focus on and what to be aware of. It works beautifully. And then, like I said in the beginning, I think I am considering signing up for the online course just to, get back into it more deeply and just try that format, because I think there's a lot of value in the restful posture you can take when you're watching a video and listening to a lecture rather than reading it yourself. I love reading, but I think that option could really serve a lot of people too.
And a lot of people aren't used to reading a lot, or it's difficult for them, or
maybe they get sleepy or something happens where you can sit down and listen to something or watch something for a half an hour or whatever, and then hit the pause and come back later. And that's engaging in another level, in another way that can fit a lot of people's lifestyles. So I would recommend checking that option if reading the book isn't in the way for you. But again, buy the book, you get a discount on the online course, you get access to the audio exercises. Do it all. So
that's right. Do it all.
Do it all.
Raw.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you, Mom, for spending your time to share this with us. And I hope it really helps a lot of you. If there's any feedback that you have or questions, leave them in the comments below. We'll put links to what we talked about in the description, and anything else that you would like us to discuss or cover later on. If you have any ideas, go ahead and share them, and we'll do our best to meet your needs. So yes, it's been lovely. Thank you everyone so much.
Yep. Thank you. God bless you all.